Alright everyone, this video is going to be about the 2020 election and why this election is going to be different from the 2016 election. So before I get into the first slide, I just want to tell you why I made this video. A lot of people believe that Donald Trump will win re-election because in 2016 the pollsters got it all wrong. Multiple reasons outside of that, but that's one of the biggest reasons. The pollsters are wrong. Donald Trump ended up winning the Rust Belt when in reality the polls suggested that he was going to lose badly there. So, anyway, that has really affected a lot of people's predictions this election. A lot of people aren't sure about Biden's chances of winning because of that failure in 2016. But I think that is misguided. I think that this election is significantly different from the 2016 election, and I'm going to get into the reasons why. So starting off, Biden is now the agent of change. So what I mean by that is, I'm not going to read this word for word, but basically, in 2016, Donald Trump was the agent of change. The Obama administration had lasted for 8 years, and because of that, Hillary Clinton was seen as the continuance of the status quo. Now, most Americans were not satisfied with the status quo. Most Americans wanted some sort of change. Donald Trump rose up to winning the Republican nomination as a populist sort of candidate. Bernie Sanders performed very well in 2016 as well. So obviously Americans were sort of tired of the same old status quo. Donald Trump was seen as the agent of change. He was able to get a bunch of swing voters to vote for him because of that. This time around, Biden is the agent of change. He's not necessarily seen as a reformist, but Donald Trump has been president for 3.5 years now. Biden has not been in office for 3.5 years. In election years where there's currently an incumbent president running for re-election, generally people are going to look at that president's record. They're not going to look at the opponent's record as much because, the person in power is the one who's able to directly affect their lives. So if people don't like Trump, then they end up voting for Biden. They're not even looking at Biden all that much. Sort of like in 2016 when many voters weren't really looking at Trump, they were just looking at the failures that they saw in the Obama administration. They saw the corruption of Hillary Clinton, so they ended up voting for Trump as a result. So Biden definitely has that advantage. Trump is now on the defense, not Biden, and that's going to impact this election in a very big way. There is less variability this time around, so you can see the graphics that I put up there. Obviously, Hillary Clinton had some moments where she led by a significant amount. In July of 2015, for example, right around the time Donald Trump announced he was running for president, Hillary Clinton was beating him 53 to 34%. That's a huge margin. That's a 19-point margin. But that margin narrowed up once Donald Trump began, getting his name out there, began rising in the polls for the Republican primaries. And well before 2016 came around, the polls had narrowed up to, within a point of one another. And then that's how they continue to be. And if you looked at other candidates were beating Hillary Clinton by an even larger margin. But Donald Trump had several points in time. You can see in very late 2015, looks like November of 2015, they were pretty much tied. What looks like late February, early March, they were pretty much tied. Hillary Clinton had a big boost after pretty much winning her party's nomination, but that was quickly closed. Late May, early June, it was pretty much tied. Donald Trump actually gained the lead after the Republican convention in late July of 2016. So a lot of ups and downs, Hillary Clinton going from in April from a 50 to 38 point lead, so a 12-point lead, to Donald Trump leading by 2 points, 3 points in July. This time around, it's very different. Biden has maintained a consistent lead of about 50 points. He's fallen down to around 48 at some points, but for the most part, he's maintained a consistent lead around 50 points. Hillary Clinton really did not scrape 50 points all that often. It was usually 46, 45 points. And even though there has been some fluctuation, we haven't seen those, what looks like 5 or 6 times where Donald Trump actually ended up pretty much completely closing the gap. Even after Donald Trump was acquitted in the Senate impeachment trial, we still saw Biden leading by a pretty significant margin, like at least 4 points. So obviously, even despite the fact that there's been many events, big events this year, the polls haven't changed all that much. And that suggests that, if a pandemic and impeachment trial and, nationwide protests and riots can't actually take down or change the polls, at least in some way, then there's probably not going to be an event between now and November that are going to change the polls all that much. There are fewer swing and third-party voters in this election. In 2016, about 9% of Americans voted third party. About 12% of Americans said they would vote third party in late August. Right now, there's almost 0%, like 1 or 2% of Americans are saying they're going to vote third party. Third party voters, many of them would have voted for Hillary Clinton. I'm not exactly sure on the numbers there. Obviously, a certain percentage of Gary Johnson voters probably would have voted for Trump, but it probably ended up hurting Hillary Clinton more than it hurt Trump, especially in the Rust Belt. The big point I want to make is on Election Day in 2016, about 9.5% of voters were undecided. In late August, over 12% claimed they were. Now, only about 7% of voters are undecided, and it's actually been around 4 or 5% for the past few months, which is unheard of. This close to an election. Well, there's actually usually less undecided voters on election day than there are months before, but it's really unheard of. We usually see a little over, at least double-digit undecided voters at this point. So anyway, what that means is, and this is the important point I want to make, I'm probably going to make it more, build upon it in a few slides, but swing voters broke for Donald Trump in 2016. This time around, even if they break heavily for Donald Trump, Biden's still close enough to 50% that he would still win the election. So the blue wall has returned. In late August of 2016, about 15% of voters in Wisconsin, 14% of voters in Pennsylvania, and 23% of voters in Michigan were undecided. Now only about 6% in Wisconsin, 7% in Pennsylvania, and 10% in Michigan are undecided. So those are significantly lower, about half as many undecided voters as there were in late August of 2016 in those 3 Rust Belt states, which were crucial for Donald Trump's victory. Like I said in the earlier slide, Trump won undecided voters pretty overwhelmingly, and especially in the Rust Belt, which explained his unexpected victory there. So because of the lack of undecided voters this time around, even if Biden lost those undecided voters by the same margin or a much larger margin than Clinton lost them in 2016, he would still end up winning in the Rust Belt, which if you did the math the day before the election, that wasn't the case in 2016. In 2016, based on the polls, making a prediction that suggested Clinton was going to win for sure was very ignorant, because there were so many swing voters that could have broken for Donald Trump, and they actually ended up doing it. But the fact is, this time around, I didn't put this up on this slide, but this time around, swing voters look like they're probably going to break for Biden over Trump. So there have been 3 major political events / crises this year. Obviously, Donald Trump's impeachment. He got acquitted in the Senate trial. The coronavirus pandemic, economic fallout, the largest drop in GDP in a single quarter in American history, the killing of George Floyd, and massive protests and riots. It's been a bad year for Donald Trump. It's been a bad year for Republicans. Obviously, the polls have remained pretty consistent, which shows that those severe negative events haven't necessarily harmed the Republican Party all that much, and they haven't harmed the president all that much, but they haven't helped them either. And the point I'm trying to make is, if we're so consistent that Donald Trump isn't going to get hurt by these kinds of events, then it probably goes the other way. And that's why I said earlier that even if everything clears up between now and Election Day, if you look at the polls like right after Donald Trump's impeachment acquittal, where he should have actually rebounded before the coronavirus pandemic started, he only barely rebounded. There's probably not going to be any events between now and November that are going to be larger than these three events that happened this year. And because of that, I don't really see anything helping Donald Trump win this November. The final prediction I have is I predict a Biden victory in this election, whether it's a small victory of about 3 or 4 points, and he wins just those three upper Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which he would win the election even if he lost every other state that Donald Trump won back from Obama in 2016, or a larger victory, which is probably more likely, where he picks up a state like North Carolina, Arizona, or Florida, all three of them maybe Ohio can be in there, Iowa might. Either way, the consistency, lack of swing voters, and overall mood of the country points to a Biden victory, I think. And this is my final prediction map. Biden with 335 electoral votes, Trump with 203. I have him winning North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. Could be possible that Trump wins North Carolina, but I think Arizona and Florida are more likely to go for Biden for sure. And overall, I think this election is going to be significantly different from 2016, and I think over the next 4 years at least, we're probably going to have a flip when it comes to power in Washington. I think Democrats will probably pick up the Senate too. So we'll see what happens, but I definitely do think I'm more confident in this prediction than I was in 2016.